I'm going to tell you about Lingua Latina today. This is maybe, if I had to take a guess, probably 0 of you use Lingua Latina in your classrooms. Well, I'm going to try to convince you to do otherwise. Maybe today will help you get a little bit more clear of a picture of what to do with Latin. So here's my outline for our presentation. I have, this is actually the entire slide, so I have the aspect ratio fixed, so you should be able to see everything. Maybe a little bit smaller than I would have liked, but I don't really have time to play around with the Zoom at the moment. So anyways, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. I am going to give you a little bit more of an apology for why to use Lingua Latina than I did with Saxon Math, because I don't think I need to convince anyone to use Saxon Math here at this conference. But Lingua Latina might be a little bit odd. I know there's at least one Memoria Press article out there that says, do not use the natural method. You should not do that. So don't use Lingua Latina, essentially is what it says. But I'm going to tell you that that needs to be challenged a little bit, and I'm also going to try to defend that opinion. I also think it's going to be helpful to know some goals. When I first started in 2017 teaching Latin, I really didn't know where I was going or what I was shooting for, so I was just kind of following the book. But it's helpful to know what we really want to do, what our end product should be. So I'm going to try to articulate that a little bit. Most of what I'm going to do here today is a demonstration. You should have received a whiteboard and a whiteboard marker from my lovely wife. I'm going to show you exactly how to use those and how that's going to be one of your best tools in the classroom. If you were here for my math presentation, you saw how we did that in math. And I said then, and I'll say it now, I'll repeat it now, especially if you weren't here for that presentation, you probably need to use these every single class period in every single class, whether it's Latin or history or logic. Your whiteboard is a great tool not only to assess, but also, to teach, to preview, to get them to write and compose and do some of their own things. There's so much you can do with these whiteboards, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you a taste of that. I do have a link at the very end. It'll say about me. It'll tell me, or contact information is what it'll be. And there'll be a little link in there at the end, and that'll give you my, I got to hand something to you. Dear, can you go into my backpack? I've got an expanding folder. It's gray. Yes, and in there's a whole bunch of packets all stapled together. Yes, please hand those out. So it'll give you my workbook, which I composed myself. What my wife is handing you here is only chapter 3, so I don't want to give you, all 120 pages or whatever it is. But I'm going to give you a link to all of that, to this presentation. I've got some more information as well on that. It's a Google Doc. It's a folder on Google Docs. It's got all that information for you. So you're welcome to use any and all of that if you want, or none of it. But keep your eyes open for that last slide and make sure that I show that to you. I had some problems, so I didn't get quite to that slide in my last presentation. But you're going to want that. So all this stuff will be there. But the majority of what I'm going to do today is to demonstrate how I use this in my classroom and how it's awesome. All right? And then about 10 or so minutes for questions and answers, because you're going to have some, and inevitably I always forget things, or I don't say things that I should, and you'll help me out with that by asking those questions at the end. All right. So let's get right into it. So first of all, a little bit about me. I've got, I think it's 10 years of teaching experience. I don't actually know the answer to that question. But only 4 years classically. I finished my 4th year at St. Paul Hamel last year, and I also received a bit of a promotion. I'm now the principal at St. Paul Hamel. It's Hamel, Illinois. That's in the St. Louis metro area. I spent 3 years using Wheelock's Latin and Latina Christiana. You might recognize Latina Christiana as Memoria Press. Wheelock's Latin is not Memoria Press, but it kind of, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of the recommended text from the CCLE. That's what the CCLE folks suggest. It's a good book, and it can be used successfully. I think that's one thing I want to start off by emphasizing, is that any textbook can be used successfully with the right teacher, but sometimes that right textbook will push you even farther, so just be aware of that. I'm a graduate student as well. I'm about halfway through my Master's of Classical Christian Studies, is what they call it, at New St. Andrews College. That's Douglas Wilson's college out in Moscow, Idaho. You might recognize Douglas Wilson, the case for classical education, sort of one of those seminal voices in the classical Christian movement. All right, and I should also make special mention of my professor, Mr. Timothy Griffith, who runs an outlet called Picta Dicta, if you've ever heard of that. Picta Dicta is a sort of an online language learning platform, maybe not unlike Duolingo, but it's all Latin. I could be wrong on that, I suppose. Brilliant mind. I learned a lot from him. I took 2 classes, Latin Pedagogy 1 and 2 under him. So a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is kind of through him, if you will. All right, so why Lingua Latina? So I'm going to give you a couple reasons here. All of these you've probably heard before. These are all good and useful and true. So it is, and I'm just going to run through all of these. It's engaging. You'll notice the story that we read today. We'll read a little bit today is engaging. It's fun. It's very much at the kids' level, but it's well told. And it's fun for the teacher as well. My staff is here. We read Lingua Latina the past 2 years sporadically. But as we would read the stories together as a staff, we all enjoyed it, right? It's scalable, and what I mean by that is, you know, you've got different levels in your class. Some kids are way at the top, some kids are way at the bottom. It's very easy to allow those kids way at the top to do their thing, and they can rise and they can shine. And the kids at the bottom, you can scale that down as necessary. And you'll see in my workbook that you've got there, I've got some really nice scalable questions that are very easily answered at a very basic sort of, you might say, grammar level, but can also be handled very, creatively. Almost all of my assignments, you'll see the directions will say scribe sententiam. What does scribe sententiam mean, do you think? Write a sentence. And then I've got some direction there, cum accusativo. So write a sentence with an accusative. And so, the kids at the bottom, they'll be able to do that because I've given them a model. And then the kids that are way at the top, sorry, no problem. The kids that are way at the top, they can be very creative with that, and they can express themselves in different ways. So it is also very scalable. Here I've got there's a concrete goal. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I would like to argue that it is classical. And of course, some of that has to do with you as a teacher. But some of my reasonings here, it's usable, it's historical. You'll see that, one of the chapters in Lingua Latina, you have a picture of a Roman house. Okay, so they teach you about the different Roman houses and what goes on there. And then, of course, if you're reading the book of the ancient world, or the book of the Romans, okay, that's a Memoria Press text. Well, they also talk about what goes on in a Roman house. And this room is called that, and this room is called that. So it's very historical. It's set in about 100 AD, so it's really cool because they'll talk about the Roman gods. And then all of a sudden you get to chapter 16, and one of the girls, as the ship is about to sink, she says to the sailors, "Stop calling out those gods. Call it to Jesus Christ." So she petitions Jesus to save her from the ship. So it is interesting how it's written. It's very well written, and it's historical. And there's several times where you'll draw from what you read in Lingua Latina, and you'll use that in your history class or your literature class or whatever. It's also very unified, and what I mean by that is you have a plot. Okay, there are characters and plot, and they continue in each succeeding chapter. Whereas with Wheelock's, you've got those nice sentences, from actual Roman authors. That's great, but it's very haphazard. It's not thematic, and sometimes that can be difficult. If you're trying to learn, what I'm going to say is, I want to make sure I say this right, inductively. I think I did the right one. All right. So why Lingua Latina? Well, here's your main reason. All right. So this is why I've got this all isolated here. Here's your main reason: imitation. So one of the things one of the ways that we learn best is through imitation, right? So we want to, if we want them to learn Latin really well, we want them to have good Latin to read. And we want them to have good Latin to write. We want them to have good Latin to listen to and good Latin to speak with. And Lingua Latina will provide you with a wealth of that, all right? I'll tell you a little bit more about how I do that in my demonstration. You'll get to see that. But 4 things have to happen in my classroom every day. And Pastor here conveniently has all 4 of those words up there for me. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Here his argument was your listening vocabulary, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, is larger than your speaking vocabulary, but this helps you to feed into all of these things, all right? And, Quintilian says that your reading is going to help your writing. I'm paraphrasing here. Your reading is going to help your writing, which is going to help your speaking. And I would add, is going to help your listening. And then I would also add, which is going to help your, and I forget which one I started with, your reading. But, right, it's just going to cycle. And all four of those things are going to enforce one another and build on one another. So Lingua Latina gives you plenty of opportunities every single day and all 30 minutes or however long your class is to do all four of those things: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Of course, all in Latin, and that's what we want to do. All right? Any questions on that? All right. So this might be a little controversial for some of you. What is the goal of Latin? Maybe some of you have thought, well, it's to help teach certain learning skills. I think that's way too low. I think if you're going to play the game, you got to play the game to win. Okay? So for me, the goal of Latin instruction is fluency. I want them to pick up Cicero, Pliny, Julius Caesar, whatever. I want them to pick them up and be able to read them in the native language. That's a huge goal. And I don't think that can be accomplished by the 8th grade. But by the 8th grade, they should be able to pick up a Lingua Latina and be able to read through it, I would say, till at least chapter 12 with some success. Now, my incoming 8th graders should finish somewhere around chapter 25. All right, so my 8th graders will graduate this coming year around chapter 25 of Lingua Latina. That's about 2/3 of the way through. I've only made it to about 26 myself, and I'm not fluent by any stretch of the imagination. But I would say if you can get through the entirety of that first book, you really are well off to be able to read Latin on your own with maybe some help. All right. All right, so why do we want fluency in the first place? Well, of course, it improves your English. Maybe some of you have noticed that some of our older English authors were better than some of our newer English authors. And my instructor at New St. Andrews pointed this out. They were all fluent in Latin. So like a Charles Dickens was fluent in Latin, and his English, you might even say, is Latinate. And is that one reason why it's better? I don't know. But certainly as you learn another language, that's going to help you to improve your English. It gives you access to the classics, and to give you access to the classics in the native language is important. As we know, certain things get lost in translation, and then there's a feedback loop that occurs. So as you read more classics, as you read more Latin, you improve your English, which helps you to read more classics, and you just keep on learning and learning and learning. All right? So I would argue that if you're going to have a Latin program, you should be trying to win the game, and you should try to get your students fluent. With the understanding that by the 8th grade, they probably aren't going to be fluent, so don't feel bad if they're not. But again, this is kind of where you want to aim for. All right, so for our demonstration, what we're going to do, and this is the actual text here in front of us, we're going to read aloud. And so we just spent an hour or so about the benefits of reading aloud. And what I will usually do here is I will start on one side of the room, and they will read the Latin out loud. And I always say you may read a sentence or more if you like, and then when you're finished, then the next person will go. This is right from the text, and this is Capitulum Tertium, which is chapter 3. I am jumping ahead a little bit. I will tell you that chapter 1 is written really easily, and so chapter 1's a little, I don't want to say boring, but it's kind of boring. But it's a really good way it's a really not intimidating way for kids to start. So I would say even 6th grade, 5th grade, even down to 4th grade would have no problem reading chapter 1. It gets a lot harder pretty quickly. But I want to do chapter 3, especially because it introduces our main characters, and there's kind of some funny things going on here. And then there's also a really important grammatical lesson to take away from this. So all of our chapters will begin with a sort of heading graphic. We see tres pueri, tres liberi is another way you could say this, 3 children. We've got Iulia, Marcus, and Quintus. Iulia is saying la la. You might guess as to what she's doing. You also have a gloss over here. This gloss helps you to figure out the words. By the way, has anyone noticed any English words yet? Okay. The author himself, if I'm not mistaken, the author didn't actually know English. This entire textbook is in Latin, with the exception of like the copyright page. And we also have some pictures over here in the gloss so that you can kind of deduce what's going on or what the words mean, especially if there isn't a nice English derivative. All right? So just be aware of that. There's these glosses here for the sake of legibility, because I don't have a textbook to give each and every one of y'all. I've made this really, really big, and that excludes the gloss. But just understand, when you buy this textbook, you've got all these tools here, and you would teach the students, this is how you use the gloss. Here's your index. Here's your glossary. So they would be aware of that, and you're going to miss a little bit of it, I guess, because you don't have access to that gloss. But I can always scroll over. So for the sake of just picking someone, why don't we start on this side of the room? And if you don't know how to pronounce a Latin word, guess what? Do you think your students are going to know how to pronounce a Latin word? No. Well, maybe. I am, yes. Yes. There's going to be times when they mispronounce a word, and that's okay. What I usually will do is I'll step in and I'll help them. I'll know that they don't know how to pronounce a word, so I'll just say it for them. And then they have to repeat after me, so make sure that you do actually say the word. You know how sometimes you'll say puer, and then they just skip that word, and then, you don't get away with that in my classroom. I think that's it. So, and I do want you to start at line 1 here, and that's this right here. So do read this right here. So go ahead, do your best.
All right. Skyna prima.
Good. Skyna prima is how I'd say that. And why don't we go in front here to the blue next? So this would be line 2.
Personae, William, Marcus, Quintus.
Good, excellent. I would say personae, A-E is I as an isle, personae, Iulia, Marcus, Quintus. And then in the back, line 3, please.
Julia cantat, lala, Julia leta est.
Good, and so he read 2 sentences. That's perfect, especially because that was a full line, full idea. And again, you're not seeing the picture, but Iulia cantat. There's the picture, Iulia cantat, and she says la la. All right. Let's go to Dr. Tallman next.
Marcus latest known as.
Good.
Julia cantat. La 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 la.
Very good. And feel free to have fun with it. That's fine too.
Marcus, Eratus est.
Julia cantat la 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 la.
And we'll go to
Marcus Julian Pulsat.
all right, now I want to pause there. Okay, Marcus Iulium Pulsat. Now that's a new word. You've not seen that. And you can do this 2 different ways. You can give them the vocabulary ahead of time, which is what I did last year. I don't know if I'm going to do that next year. Because what does that word pulsat mean? Well, we don't know. However, we can look over at the gloss. What does it look like Marcus is doing to Parva Puella? Beating. Pulsat, what do you think that means? Hit. Okay, Marcus iratus est. What does that mean? Irritated. Excellent. Good. So you're using some English derivatives, right? We can figure out what these words mean as we're going. So I'm not sure if I'm going to give them the vocabulary ahead of time next year, but there are some words you're going to have to fill in. But you can get the idea of the story here. Marcus Iulium Pulsat. All right. And again, there's different ways you can do this. Let's pick up our whiteboards. I want to show you how to use these. Please copy down this sentence. Marcus Iulium Pulsat. Please copy down that sentence. Marcus Iulium Pulsat. Please copy down that sentence on your whiteboard. And please then raise it up so that I can see it. There may be a couple questions you have. All right, good. Write it nice and big for me, too. This is a much bigger room than I'm used to. Good, good. And when I point at you and say good, you can put your whiteboards down. Good, good, good. Okay, good. Good, 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 good. By the way, we print Latin in our school. I don't really enforce that, but I always say to them, we print Latin and we write English. So some of you are using cursive, that's fine. Good. All right, this is a great way to just get them to kind of cue in on a very important topic, right? Now, what I would like you to do, listen carefully, and I will do this in my classroom too. I will try to speak as much Latin as possible. Scribe sententiam cum accusativo. Now, you just did that. Scribe sententiam cum accusativo. People who showed me your whiteboard, you did that already. Please show me a different one. There's a lot of different things you can do here. You don't have the text in front of you, and you didn't read chapters 1 and 2. But one easy thing you could do is change that first word. Instead of Marcus Iuliam pulsat, maybe Quintus Iuliam pulsat. Okay? Let's see, Marcus Iulia Marcum pulsat. Iulia Marcum pulsat. Okay?
Maybe she's not tall enough, but.
Marcus Quintum pulsat. Good. Quintus Iuliam pulsat. Good. Notice I'm repeating what I'm seeing on these whiteboards so everyone can hear them. You can't necessarily see them. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Good. Quintus Iuliam pulsat. Good. Quintum Iuliam pulsat. Something's wrong with this one, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone here, but this is how we're going to teach. All right, so this is what was written. I'm going to try to write this nice and big for everyone. Quintum Iuliam pulsat. Incorrect. And here's how I'm going to translate that. Julia punches Quintus. Is that what you wanted to say? Okay. Who's receiving the punch in your sentence? Quintus is receiving the punch. Okay. Now you've got it, what you want. Quintum Iulia pulsat. Now Quintus is receiving the punch. Okay. Iuliam quintumque Marcus pulsavit. Okay, so Marcus punched Julia and Quintus. All right. Can you please show me on your whiteboards a sentence where, well, actually, I'll do it this way. On your whiteboards, please write Quintus punches Marcus. And in Latin, obviously. What did I say? Quintus punches Marcus. Please write that on your whiteboards. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Excellent. Good. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Good. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Good. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Now, you'll notice what I'm doing here. I keep repeating this out loud, out loud, out loud. I keep repeating. The student who didn't know what I was asking for, is he going to be able to copy that by the end of this? Yes. Yes, he is. Okay. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Good. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Quintus Marcum pulsat. Good. All right, you can erase your whiteboards. Now, scribe sententiam cum accusativo. But this time, don't use Quintus or Marcus. So, scribe sententiam cum accusativo, but no Quintus or Marcus. So, maybe puer, puella, puer means boy, puella means girl. I'm just trying to get you to branch out a little bit. A lot of different things I could say here, but working with a limited vocabulary, only so much we can do. So let's see, puer means boy, puella, pater, mater. Let's see, puella, puerum pulsat. Good. Puer, amat, puellam. Good. The boy loves the girl. Puella, puerum pulsat. Good. Femina, puellam pulsat. Good. So the woman hits the girl. Good. Puer, iuliam pulsat. Good. Excellent. Good. Iulia pulsat Germanum. So Julia hits the German. Germanum means brother. Okay. Iulia pulsat puer. So that says the boy hits Julia. The boy hits Julia. Let me write that up on the board. I do this all the time, and students will do this all the time. If you've ever gotten to the accusative case, do the students ever forget how to use, put the accusative to show who receives the action? If you teach Latin, that happens all the time, right? Okay, so and I forget what was written, but I'll just go ahead and make one up. Iulia, Marcus, actually I'll do puer here. Iulia, pulsat, puer. Okay. This is what was written, I think. Here's how I translated it though. The boy hits Julia. That's not what the person wanted to say though, was it? So I intentionally translated that one wrong for them to realize, wait a second. I need to change something. What do I need to change? Oh, who receives the punch? And I think what we wanted was puerum, okay? So you can see this is kind of a good exercise to get them to learn how to use the accusative. All right, erase all your whiteboards, and I would probably tell the students to put the whiteboards away so it's not a temptation while we read aloud. And you don't necessarily have to stop reading either. In fact, I usually don't stop in the middle of reading to do this kind of an exercise, but I did kind of want to show you what we're doing. And I also wanted to make sure we were kind of understanding what was going on in the story. But, you know, you're the teacher, so you get to decide what's best. If you want to stop in the middle of the story and do something like that, that's a great activity. All right? Any questions on that before we move on? Yes?
So there isn't a grammar.
There is a grammar.
Okay, there is.
Yes.
You teach them like the ending.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Do you have my, do you have that little packet, little handout there?
Is there like a grammar in the back? Or an example of the grammar?
So Lingua Latina does have an example of the grammar, and I will sometimes make them do this. So let's see here. All right, so toward the end of each chapter, they have what's called Grammatica Latina. All right, here we are, Grammatica Latina. And here's what they call their grammar. You're going to have to supplement this. And so that's one reason why I've cooked up this workbook here. I call it the workbook. Just like in my math classes, all of their things have to go into a notebook. There's not enough room here on these pages for them to write all their answers out. So it has to be on a notebook. As I explain in my math classes as well, that notebook is really hard to lose, or at least it's much harder to lose than a loose leaf sheet of paper. So they all have their own Latin notebooks, and that's where they're going to keep all of their different answers. I'm going to have to supplement to them and say, okay, what are the endings of a second declension noun? What's interesting about Lingua Latina, we can talk about that a little bit, you know, if you're used to your Memoria Press or almost anything. I mean, Wheelock's chapter 1. Verb conjugations, okay, there's almost like no verb conjugations you have to worry about in Lingua Latina until like chapter 15, which is crazy. There's a reason why Orberg, that's the author, does it that way, and I can tell you what that reason is, but most of the grammar I'm going to talk about myself, okay? So those of you who are looking to change to Lingua Latina, that's why I'm giving you this, and remember I'm going to give you a link at the end that has my entire notebook, so you can kind of see what you need to focus on. And then there's also a college companion. All right, so I forgot to bring that book with me, but I have it cited in my in this link that I'm going to give to you. You really got to get the college companion if you're going to use Lingua Latina, because it's going to break down for you what you got to teach as far as the grammar is concerned. All right, yeah. So maybe one thing I should have said at the outset: this is classical, and you will still teach it classically. You will still have to do grammar, as in like the grammar stage, but also as in like, you know, all right, let's do our second declension endings, everyone. Us, e, o, o, e, orm, es, os, es, right? You're just going to have to do that stuff. You can't get away from it. One thing that I will do to kind of introduce new grammar is I will say in this workbook, I'll say copy, lines, whatever. So it'll say excribe, lineas, and then it'll say like 85 to 91, and then they got to copy that down. When we grade this in class, which is what I will do, just like I do in my math classes, we'll grade it in class. I'll have someone say this out loud, and then what I can do is I can start teaching. Okay, well, accusative, notice you've got the ending. Is for second declension. Aeulius, us goes to up here, or no, it's down here, you know. Puella, goes to etc. And I do kind of have some liberty with that, where I will just say, okay, here are the first declension endings, here are the second declension endings. Okay. Yes, question?
Did you find the painsaw useful?
Say that again?
Did you find the painsaw useful? They have a workbook with Lingua Latina?
Yeah.
Did you find that useful, or I see you made your own?
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So the workbook, from what I understand, are just is just this, the pensa. This is pensum B, exercise set B, and they just kind of copy this into a separate workbook. I actually did copy some of these into my workbook, but only a very few. Okay. By the way, this workbook here, I have not proofread it, so you're going to find some mistakes. In fact, I think on the very first page, you'll find a mistake if you look closely enough. It's a grammatical mistake, so use these at your own risk, I guess you could say. But based on some of my own experience, I kind of, this is what we need to focus on. And then you also had the college companion, or I had the college companion, and I could kind of figure out, we really need to focus on this area of the grammar. All right. Thank you for that question. That was a necessary question, which I had glossed over. In fact, I had skipped. All right. I want to get back to some more reading. And we're going to start here on line 9. So here's line 9. And I think we left off right here in the middle. So if you don't mind, line 9.
Yeah, Julia said,
good. And in the back?
Marcus read it. Ha ha ha.
Good. And I'm going to go down here, line 11. And I'm going to scroll up just a little bit so you can see. You've got Iulia, okay, uhuhuhu, right? Here's Marcus redet, and then there's Quintus. Let's see, let's go here for line 12, I think.
Wait, Marcus, well, pulsat. I can't see you.
How about that? Good, I'll go down a little bit here. We skipped someone here, so maybe we can go back to her.
Quintus eratus et Marcum postat.
And you can stop there because that ends the sentence, or you may continue.
Non videt Marcus, Marcus eratus postat.
And let's read some more. Let's go to this.
Julia, ubias mater, Julia Amelia non vidit.
We'll go to Gerth.
Amelia vocat. Mater. Marcus quintum postat.
Go here. Right up at the top.
Marcus spiritus. Marcus Julian.
Good.
Iulia florat et Aemiliam vocat. Mama. Marcus ne pulsat.
Good. And Contramuth.
Amelia whinnied.
And we're going to actually stop there, and you'll notice that begins Scaena Secunda, second scene. All right, so this is divided into 3 scenes. So here's a perfect place to stop. Here you can see the carnage. And you can see a foot entering Aemilia. Aemilia mater est. Aemilia is the mother. So she's going to step in and have to deal with this. You've got some quarreling children. We all know what that's like. We've maybe been on the receiving end or perhaps the giving end of this. This is a really fun story to read with your children, especially if you go to a school like mine where you've got large families that like to quarrel a lot. Anyways, you can see the gloss over here. You can see Yulia is crying. The 2 boys are fighting, and good. So next, what I'd like you to do, I've given you some workbooks. What I'd like you to do is let's go to let's see here. You can see I've got page numbers on the top. Page 23. Page 23. Now, with my Lingua Latina, I really don't test a lot in the traditional sense. So I do give them 2 tests per quarter, but they're very basic kinds of, here's some grammar questions. They're very short, it's a single page. But the way that I really assess them and what I really want them to do is to write. All right, so here's one of their big assignments. And I say that as, this is kind of like the test. This is kind of what they're doing. This is their big project. All right, and I guess I've got a copy right here maybe. And so I've titled this Capitulum Tertium Scribenes Pensum A, Writing Assignment A. Writing Assignment A. In the centered there, by the way, this is, you might call this a truth statement. This might be something you can have the kids memorize. So you could have them all stand and just recite take and probe puer, so they know that one sentence, if absolutely nothing else. It's also a good model sentence for them. But anyways, their main assignment is to scribe duo paragrapha de improbos liberos. Write 2 paragraphs about naughty children. Debes habere accusativos et genitivos in fabula tua. You should have accusatives and genitives in your story. Now, how in the world are students going to write their own stories in Latin? Well, did we not just read a story in Latin about fighting children, right? So one thing that you can do, and one thing I encourage sort of my lower level students to do, is to copy what they have here. And I encourage them to change a couple words here and there. But your top level students are going to take it and run with it. And they're going to write some pretty funny stories in Latin, and they're going to do a really good job of it. And then they're going to pick up their Latin dictionaries, and they're going to start learning new words, and it's really cool. So this is really kind of like the apex. This is what we're shooting for. This is what we want. We want them to be writing. And by writing, that's going to help their reading, that's going to help their listening, that's going to help their speaking. They're going to learn a lot of Latin because I'm giving them this really big writing assignment. Okay? And this is why I like Lingua Latina so much. If we're going to give them stories to write, they've got to have material, they've got to have vocabulary in order to write said stories. They've got to have some direction. And that's why that's why I'm going to be mimicking this story. If you go to the last page of this, I've got a second writing assignment, which is usually a little bit more difficult. Scribenes pensum B. And here it says scribe duai scaenae de improbos liberos. So now this is a longer story because there's 2 scenes. In addition to accusativos et genitivos, they also need to habere conclusionem. So debes quoque, you should also have a conclusion. Okay? So now I'm adding to that story, and I have no problem with them taking their first story and adding a conclusion to it. But the idea is as we progress to chapter 3, as they gain new vocabulary, they gain new grammar, and they get more comfortable with the language, frankly, they're able to write more and more complex stories. And that's what I'm really shooting for in this class. Not necessarily testing them on the grammar, but let's write some stories. So I'm trying to put everything together and to inspire them to do that. And we've got all the material we need, thanks to Lingua Latina, in order to accomplish that and to accomplish it well. Any questions on that?
Specific prepositions that go with the accusative and specific prepositions that go with the genitive, specific prepositions that go with the accusative and specific prepositions that go with the genitive.
Yep.
Things like that. So it basically does what BWOX does, but it does it more fun, like in a story form kind of thing.
Yeah. So, okay, so...
do a lot of that on your own, because you know it, so you have to kind of just teach it to them as you go.
So Lingua Latina will actually introduce things like that in certain chapters intentionally. All right, so I'm going to put up a sentence. You guys can all take out your whiteboards, and you can copy the sentence down. All right, I'll read it aloud for everyone. Iulia in horto est. Now, she asked about prepositions that receive an accusative. This is not the case, but this is how Lingua Latina will approach this problem. All right. And I actually have a name for this specific preposition, which I got from Mr. Griffith. That's my Latin pedagogy teacher. I don't actually know if this is, what it's technically called or whatever. But I actually will tell them this. And I'll write this up on the board, and they will hear me say this, and I will actually have this in Latin when I ask them to do this on their whiteboards. I'll say, scribe sententiam cum ablativo, locatione. I I think that's right.
No,
Locati-
locationes.
Locationes, that's right. All right, and they will know this is what I'm looking for. So anyways, you've all copied this down. Does anyone know what the translation of this is? Thank you.
Yulia is in the garden.
That's right. Julia is in the garden, okay? We're telling people where she's located. And then eventually, and I think this is in the same chapter if I'm not mistaken. I've only used Lingua Latina 1 year, by the way, in the classroom. All right, here it says, Iulia in hortum ambulat. Please copy that down in your whiteboard. Feel free, there's double-sided whiteboards, so feel free to use the other side. All right, and this I would call accusativus motionis. Accusativus motionis. And I always tell the students it's a little bit more complicated than this. And it is. But I'm going to write that word down as well. Accusative of motion. All right. So now you've got two examples on your whiteboards of an ablative of location. And so now I can say, and you can leave that, that copied sentence on your whiteboard. You might change a word. You might come up with your own. So, scribe sententiam cum ablativo locationis. Ablativo locationis. Feel free to change a word, a single word, that's fine. It's kind of hard to emulate a classroom experience because I know exactly where my students have been because I've had them for so long. Whereas you guys are just coming in here cold. You may have absolutely no Latin vocabulary, so it's a little bit hard for me to emulate that. Iulia in castella est, in the castle. Iulia in culina, ambulat, incorrect. Ambulat, ambulat, motion. We need accusativo, accusativus, ambulat. Let's see, Iulia in novice est, good. In dormi, dormi is incorrect. Dormi sounds, unless it's third declension. Iulia, which one am I looking at? In horto, known est, good. Yeah, students will try to just put a known in their sentence and call it a day, but that's totally fine. Okay, that's totally fine. They got to start somewhere. You got to understand that. You're going to have some students that are either not confident or, frankly, not good. They got to start somewhere, so you give them credit for that. Good job. Puella in horto est. Excellent. Ablativo, ablativus locationis. Let's see, Marcus in coilo est.
Let's see, what is coilo?
Just trying to remember. Oh,
Kylo. C-A-E. Good. Which am I looking at the bottom one? Now it's correct, though that's not what I asked for. Ablativus locationis. This is going to happen, right? So if you're going to have this kind of a method, you're going to have to be able to read these sentences and decipher them and to give them feedback on them. Is that hard to do? Yes, it's very hard to do. But we all, I felt the need, I had to step up and do it. And you're going to be wrong sometimes, but that's okay. We're all learning. And I think it's been very good for me personally to kind of put this expectation on myself. I think it's helped my Latin considerably. Iulia in Roma est, good. Let's see, which one am I looking at? Iulia in loco est. Iulia is in the location or in the spot. Good. Let's see here. Marcus in casa est. Good. Okay. Scribe sententiam cum accusativo motionis. Motionis. Motion. So ambulat is a good word. Ambulat means walk. It is a good word, means go, or goes, as we would say in English. He goes. Curit, he runs, etc. Let's see. Iulia in porta ambulat. Porta is incorrect. That's an ablative. I'd like accusativo motionis. So you need the accusative. All right, let's see. Iulia in aquam curit, good. Notice I'm reading all these out loud, or yeah, reading them all out loud so everyone can hear. Iulia in portam ambulat. Good. Iulia in scholam ambulat. In school? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes I don't know words, and sometimes students will try to be cheeky and they'll try to find some arcane word in the dictionary. That's fine. You know, they're looking into a Latin dictionary. There's a lot worse things they could be doing with their time. Let's see. Good. Puella in casam ambulat. So the girl walks into the house. Good. Notice I changed the translation of in there. Iulia in hortum cantat. So not really. That says Julia walks into, or Julia sings into the garden. Probably not. You might get away with that, but I would say change it to the student because I really want to emphasize I need a verb of motion. So change cantat to ambulat or something like that. All right? I would say no. I would say no. Yeah. That's right. And I am simplifying that a little bit, so if there are any Latin speakers in here, maybe I'm getting this incorrect. But I'm really trying to simplify it for the students, and also to follow what Lingua Latina will teach. They do a really good job, I think, of helping you sort through the preposition problem, because it is kind of a problem. In Wheelox, they just kind of have these sections, kind of, I don't know, haphazardly. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems haphazard. Like all of a sudden, oh, here's an accusative of something. Now here's an ablative of something else. And it just seems so, like, is this a point of emphasis? Like, where is this coming from? You know, but I think Orberg has a better plan to introduce those more naturally and more friendly and more understandably. All right. Let's see, Iulia in hortum ambulat, Iulia in romam ambulat, good. Iulia in fenestram ambulat, let's see, I know that word, but I can't remember it. Window. So Iulia walks into the window. All right, good. All right, you guys can erase your whiteboards. Any other questions for me? That was a good question. And you can see that whether you're using Wheelox or whatever, you can use these whiteboards to address some of those problems. Write a sentence using this and make them do that. And they're going to fail, which is good because then you can teach them. You can see exactly where they're failing. You can find exactly where you need to fix the issue. All right? Any other questions?
How does it teach vocab? Just through reading it and repeating it, or does it actually teach like?
Thank you for reminding me of that. Boy, I wonder if I'm forgetting anything else. So, every Wednesday I have an oral quiz. So, everyone stand. Servite omnes. I actually got this from Memoria Press. I went to the Highlands Latin Conference. They did this with their, I guess this was first form Latin. The teacher showed me how to do this. But this really emphasizes you got to know your vocabulary. If you don't know your vocabulary, forget it. You're not going to learn Latin or anything, right? You got to know your grammar. You got to know your, in this case, your vocabulary. So at the end of the chapter, you've got a whole list of vocabulary. The College Companion that I'm going to share with you has all of the translations there. Maybe the one drawback of Lingua Latina, the textbook itself doesn't actually have these translations. It does have a reference, though, to where it first appears, and usually the word is clear, but there are some words that you can't quite show, like a preposition or like an adverb or certain like words like than, T-H-A-N, or, you know, so you just have to know them. So what I did last year is on every Monday, I gave them all these words. I said, skyna means seen. And they would repeat after me. Skyna means seen. Actually, I would do the Latin first. I'd say skyna, and then they'd say skyna. Persona, then they'd say persona. And then afterwards, I would give them all the translations. Skyna means seen. Skyna means seen. Persona means person. Persona means person. So then we would get that. They would write them down or make note cards. I need to kind of rethink that a little bit. But anyways, every Wednesday, everyone would stand up. And then I would look and I would say, okay, you get to go first. Pulsat.
Pulsat.
And you have to give me the translation. I would accept that. Okay, I'll accept that. I go to the next person, and I'm just picking a word at random. Probus. Incorrect. And then I would go to the next person. I would pick a different word. I almost never repeat words. All right. Let's see right here. Iratus.
Angry?
Correct. In the back. Mama.
Mom.
Correct. All right. So then everyone gets to go twice. Everyone gets to go twice. After the second time, everyone sits down. So you may be seated. Sedate omnes. Everyone gets to go twice. They have no idea what word they're going to get, but they have to know every single word because they don't know. They might get some word that they didn't practice, so you just got to practice them all. And you only get 2 chances. You get one wrong, that's a 5 out of 10. You get them both wrong, it's a 0 out of 10. It's very harsh, but they have to know their vocabulary. I can tell you the students who did worst in my class are those that didn't know their vocabulary. So I make a pretty strict point, you better know it or I'm going to get you. And that's how I get them. They don't know the vocabulary. Right? Yes?
What about principal parts?
Principal parts, let's see. So we don't, Lingua Latina doesn't run into different verb forms until, boy, it's like chapter 8.
Does it what I mean is, does it list the principal parts for the kids, so at least they're starting to learn to chant the principal parts?
That's a good question. So eventually you're going to need to know the third principal part, for example, in order to do the perfect form. So you showed me, what was it, pulsavit, which is kind of an easy one, but there are some really weird ones, what is, let's see, faccio goes to like fakey or something like that, so it's different. So one thing that's really nice about Wheelox is you learn those 4 principal parts right away, and you can associate them. I guess my Latin teacher would say many of them are regular, and the ones that are irregular you can go back and teach. So that might be a drawback, but that might be something you as a teacher say, oh no, I don't like that. So you may say, okay, let's see, let's find some verbs here. All right, here's habet. All right, class, not habet, we're going to say habet, habere, habui, habitu, thank you. And so you might go back and add that. Really, Lingua Latina doesn't do a whole lot with verbs until like chapter 15. I can tell you why if you're interested.
Please.
Okay. In English, we have kind of a verb conjugation system, kind of. We kind of have principal parts, but we don't really have the noun declensions. We kind of do with pronouns. But it's very odd to change the noun because it has a different function. So what I believe the author's trying to do is really focus in on, let's get these nouns down first. And then we can worry about the noun verb conjugations, which are maybe more familiar with us. All right. That's the way it was explained to me. And you might disagree with that strategy or that path. And that's one thing you have to kind of keep in mind. I'm not a fluent Latin speaker, as I said, so I'm thinking of this more of from a pedagogy perspective. What I want my kids to do is to read, write, speak, and listen. I can get them to do that in spades here with Lingua Latina. And so as we maybe traverse things a little bit differently than maybe Wheelox would, I'm happy to do that because I'm getting that pedagogy perspective that I would prefer rather than Wheelox. Okay? So I'm not exactly sure if there's an advantage or disadvantage necessarily to having verbs later or sooner, but I am confident that this pedagogical method is more effective. So maybe that answers your question, maybe it doesn't. Yes?
As far as writing goes, does reading this kind of stuff help them with word order so that translates into their
Yes.
writing? Or okay.
Mm-hmm. And I always enforce it, especially in the beginning. You will do subject, object, verb, but then sort of by chapter 5, I stopped enforcing that. I stopped even mentioning it, and they will, from my 1 year of experience, but they will kind of pick it up through, I don't want to say osmosis, but they've done it, and so they're familiar with it, and it just becomes theirs. All right, imitation. That's what I want from Lingua Latina. All right, these are all good questions. Anything else? All right, I know I need to show you at least one more thing, so sit tight. All right, so here's my contact information if you want anything. This URL here has all my stuff, including my full workbook, which you're welcome to use. I will tell you that it's all in PDF form, so unfortunately you can't edit it unless you know kind of a very technical language called LaTeX. But I do have the source files up there as well, so you technically can just grab right from those source files and edit them as you wish, assuming you do know how to use LaTeX. And I'll be happy to have any conversations with you about any of this stuff, not only here this week, but you've got my email and phone number. That's actually my cell phone number, so you can call me there. As I've said too, I've had to interview several different teachers in the past couple months. We're all still learning a little bit, and so I stand in front of you not necessarily as this confirmed expert, that I know everything and I do it all the right way. But I'm still learning, and I think I've stumbled on something good. I think students are really doing very good things in Latin, and I'm happy to hear other perspectives and criticism, because that's going to help me and my students as well. All right. Now, if you have no other questions, I think that just about does it for my presentation. I would appreciate it if you could erase your whiteboard. I know we don't have erasers, but erase